Join now Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, into the conversation. Professor Nalapat, many are in fact showing a mirror to the US now, based on how they are trying to preach peace to many across the world, and forget what happened earlier with the invasion of Iraq and what the reasons were cited for the invasion and what turned out to be the truth later.
Look, the fact of the matter is the US knew very well there was no WMD in Iraq. President George W. Bush, he basically, there was a certain sense of personal vendetta. He thought Saddam Hussein had been planning to assassinate his father, which of course was again fiction. But the reality is, if the US really believed there was WMD in Iraq, it got supply trains several miles long. Which army in his right mind is going to have supply trains several miles long in a hostile country, or are ruled by a hostile power who has access to WMD? None. So the reality is George W. Bush knew from the beginning that Russia had no WMD, but he wanted an excuse to attack Saddam Hussein, divert attention from Afghanistan, which is really the hotbed of Al-Qaeda, and responsible basically as the base for operations regarding 9/11. But I only want to say that, one parallel can be drawn here. I think President Trump knows full well that India is not fueling the war in Ukraine. I mean, certainly not to the extent some other countries are, but he needs some excuse. George Bush needed an excuse. WMD was an excuse. He needs an excuse to levy tariffs on India. And as in the case of George W. Bush, it's entirely some personal issues of pride and ego. I don't know what they are that are, in my view, driving this policy. And I certainly agree with our American colleagues that the sooner this policy course is abandoned, the better. And India-US relations over the long run have to be stable because of the threat from China. But the reality is that the damage President Trump is doing to it is looked at with great glee by one country, and that is China, and of course Russia, because of the Ukraine war. So I just want to say, Uday, that just as George W. Bush knew there was no WMD in Iraq, I would like to say that Donald Trump knows that what he's saying is fiction. Okay. But he needs some excuse to levy these tariffs, and this is his excuse, not WMD, but fueling the Iraq war.
I was just going to say that the fueling the Russia war, is that an unfair allegation on India when action is not being taken against China and others, and also the Russian president is being met and hosted in Alaska?
You're absolutely right. I mean, India had nothing to do with the Ukraine war. It did not cause it, and it's not in a position to stop it. But the reality of the situation is Trump wanted an excuse. President Trump wanted an excuse. And for those in India who have been admirers of President Trump, in my case, right from 2015 onwards, as you can see from my writings and television appearances, it's a great disappointment to see President Trump behaving the way he has been behaving over the past few weeks. And I hope the real Donald Trump comes back and we get that real Donald Trump back, because that is a very sensible individual. Where this person is taking a sledgehammer to US relations with countries that are very much needed. I mean, the Japanese, the Koreans, the various other, the Canadians, and the Indians. I mean, I personally feel the sooner he gets off this, God knows why, why he is doing all this. But I think there's nothing to do. He knows that the reasons given are not correct, but he's doing it out of some sense of personal pique and some personal ego issues, which I frankly am at a loss to understand what they are.
Yes. What is needed then to reset this partnership, Professor Nalapat, in the days ahead?
Look, what is needed...
We've seen a new ambassador being appointed as well today.
Well, the advantage of the new ambassador is he's got direct line to President Trump. So in that sense, I certainly welcome that. And I'm glad that finally there's a US ambassador in residence in Delhi, because that had not been the case for quite some time. And I think that ensured that the ties were not as strong as they ought to have been. So I'm very glad about that personally. But the point is that the new ambassador is a very capable person, but he should not just be an echo chamber or expressing the views of Donald Trump uh, on the soil of New Delhi, but he should actually convey back to the US president the harm that he's doing, and very privately, of course, speak truth to power. If he does that, he would have basically done a lot to basically help the United States. Forget about India, the United States, because India is an essential partner where keeping the Indo-Pacific free, open, and inclusive, in the words of Prime Minister Modi, is concerned. And the Indo-Pacific is a critical waterway. The Chinese are looking to control it, and subsequently they'll move on to the Atlantic. So I think from all points of view, I would like to say the reset is needed.
Okay.
And I think that means President Trump has to somehow get off this current mood and get over ego and peak, because these factors have a relationship when, interpersonal relations, I mean, between friends and all that, they should not have a strategic impact of the kind that Donald Trump is trying to, is trying to cause. Thank
All
you.
right. My thanks to Professor Nalapath for joining us with your perspective on this.